Welcome, dear friend, to another gentle journey through the natural world. Tonight, we're diving beneath the waves into waters warm and crystalline, where sunlight dances through the depths and colors bloom like an underwater garden. We're exploring the vibrant, ancient, and utterly mesmerizing world of coral reefs. As you settle in, let the concerns of the day drift away like sand in a gentle current. Allow your breathing to slow, your muscles to soften. Perhaps you're lying in bed or curled up in your favorite chair. Wherever you are in this moment, you're exactly where you need to be. And speaking of where you are, I'm always curious about the wonderful people who join me on these quiet adventures. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Whether you're in a bustling city or a quiet countryside near the ocean or far inland, I'm grateful you're here with me now, ready to explore the underwater cities built by some of Earth's tiniest architects. Let's begin our descent into this watery realm where creatures both ancient and miraculous have been building, growing, and thriving for hundreds of millions of years. Sopterm, the ancient architects. Fact 1. Coral reefs have been gracing our oceans for approximately 485 million years, first appearing at the dawn of the early Ordovician period. To put this in perspective, corals are older than dinosaurs, older than fish, older than land plants, and even older than the Appalachian Mountains. Imagine the Earth as it was back then, a world utterly alien to us, with no creatures walking on land, no forests, no flowers, and no sounds except the wind and waves. The continents were arranged differently, clustered together in configurations we would barely recognize. Yet even in those ancient seas, corals were beginning their remarkable journey. They displaced the microbial and sponge reefs of the earlier Cambrian period, establishing themselves as master builders of underwater structures. Through the Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, and all the periods that followed, these organisms persisted. They witnessed the first fish evolving jaws, the first plants colonizing the land, the rise of the great reptiles, their extinction, and the eventual emergence of mammals and humans. Through ice ages and tropical epochs, through times when the seas rose high and times when they retreated, corals adapted, evolved, and survived. They endured 5 major mass extinction events that wiped out the majority of life on Earth, yet they always returned, rebuilding their reefs generation by generation. Fact 2. Some coral species alive today first appeared during the Middle Triassic period, around the same time the first dinosaurs began to roam the Earth, roughly 230 to 240 million years ago. These living fossils have persisted through dramatic climate shifts that would have challenged the adaptability of almost any organism. Consider what they've endured. They survived the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event that marked the end of the Triassic period, an event caused by massive volcanic eruptions that released enormous quantities of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, warming the planet and acidifying the oceans. They persisted through the Cretaceous period, when sea levels were so high that much of the continents we know today were submerged beneath shallow seas. They witnessed the catastrophic asteroid impact 66 million years ago that ended the age of dinosaurs, an event that darkened the skies, cooled the planet, and poisoned the oceans with sulfuric acid. Through continental drift, they rode the slow dance of tectonic plates as land masses collided and separated, as the Atlantic Ocean opened and the Mediterranean repeatedly filled and dried. These corals adapted to changing ocean currents, shifting nutrient patterns, and fluctuating temperatures. They evolved alongside the fish we see today, developing their intricate symbioses, perfecting their calcium carbonate architecture. The fact that these same lineages persist today, still building reefs in tropical waters, is a testament to the remarkable resilience and adaptability woven into their biology over countless generations. Fact 3. While individual coral polyps may only live for a few years to several decades, depending on the species, with some living just 2 years and others reaching 40 or 50 years, the reef structures they build can be thousands to millions of years old. Most current reefs, the ones we can visit and dive on today, are estimated to be between 5,000 and 10,000 years old, formed after the last glacial period when melting ice caused sea levels to rise and flood continental shelves. Picture this process as the massive ice sheets covering much of North America and Europe began their slow retreat around 20,000 years ago. Meltwater flowed into the oceans, raising sea levels by more than 120 meters over the course of several thousand years. This flooding created vast new areas of shallow sunlit water along continental margins and around volcanic islands, perfect conditions for coral larvae to settle and begin building new reefs. The corals grew upward and outward, keeping pace with the rising seas, constructing the limestone foundations we see today. But beneath these relatively young surfaces lie much older reef structures. In some locations, scientists drilling into reefs have found limestone deposits dating back hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. Layers upon layers of ancient reef material compressed and preserved beneath the living surface. Each layer represents a different chapter in the reef's history, a snapshot of ocean conditions at that moment in time, a record written in calcium carbonate, and the fossils of countless organisms. Fact 4. Coral reefs are not plants, nor are they rocks, though they may appear to be either at first glance. Despite their appearance and the fact that they stay rooted in one place, seemingly as immobile as any stone outcropping, coral reefs are actually massive colonies of tiny animals called polyps. Each polyp is a soft-bodied creature related to sea anemones and jellyfish, belonging to the ancient phylum Cnidaria, a group characterized by their radial symmetry, simple body plan, and specialized stinging cells called cnidocytes. These miniature creatures possess a remarkable simplicity in their basic structure, essentially a hollow cylinder with a mouth at one end surrounded by tentacles and a base that attaches to the reef structure. They have no brain, no eyes in the traditional sense, no heart, and no complex organs. Yet, despite this apparent simplicity, they are sophisticated organisms capable of feeding, defending themselves, reproducing both sexually and asexually, and most impressively, constructing vast architectural wonders from calcium carbonate extracted from seawater. The polyp's mouth leads to a gastrovascular cavity where digestion occurs, and waste is expelled back out through the same opening, a simple but effective system. The tentacles surrounding the mouth are armed with those specialized cnidocytes, cells containing tiny harpoon-like structures called nematocysts that can inject toxins into prey or predators. During the day, many polyps retract into their protective limestone cups, but at night, they extend their tentacles to capture passing zooplankton from the water column, supplementing the nutrition they receive from their symbiotic algae partners. Fact 5. A single coral polyp is typically quite small, averaging 1 to 3 millimeters in diameter, though some species can grow larger. Despite their diminutive size, when millions of these polyps work together over thousands of years, they create reef structures that can be seen from space. The collective power of these tiny architects is truly humbling. Orators, the rainbow builders. Fact 6. Coral polyps themselves are actually transparent, their tissues clear and ghostly, without pigmentation of their own. The brilliant colors we associate with healthy coral reefs, those stunning yellows like liquid sunshine, deep greens reminiscent of tropical forests, rich browns like fertile earth, electric blues brighter than any sky, and vibrant purples found nowhere else in nature, come not from the coral animal itself, but from microscopic algae called zooxanthellae that live within their tissues. These single-celled organisms, properly classified as dinoflagellates, are so small that millions could fit on the head of a pin, measuring only a few micrometers across, about a tenth the width of a human hair. Yet these tiny organisms are the painters of the reef, the artists responsible for the spectacular palette that draws divers and snorkelers from around the world. Each zooxanthella contains pigments that serve various functions in photosynthesis: chlorophylls that absorb blue and red light, carotenoids that capture additional wavelengths and provide those warm yellow and orange tones, and unique dinoflagellate pigments like peridinin that contribute to the golden brown hues common in many coral species. The specific color of a coral colony depends on several factors: the species and strain of zooxanthellae it hosts, the density of these symbionts within the tissue, the depth at which the coral lives, which affects what wavelengths of light reach it, and any additional pigments the coral itself may produce. Some corals even produce fluorescent proteins that glow in brilliant blues, greens, and reds when exposed to ultraviolet light, adding yet another layer to the reef's chromatic complexity. Fact 7. The relationship between coral polyps and zooxanthellae is one of nature's most beautiful and essential partnerships, a mutualistic symbiosis refined over millions of years of coevolution. The arrangement is elegantly efficient. The coral provides the algae with a protected home within its tissues, shielded from currents that might sweep them away and from many predators that might consume them. The coral polyp also produces the raw materials the zooxanthellae need for photosynthesis: carbon dioxide from the coral's cellular respiration, along with nitrogen and phosphorus compounds from the coral's metabolic waste. The polyp's transparent tissues allow sunlight to reach the zooxanthellae, essentially turning each polyp into a tiny greenhouse. In exchange, through the process of photosynthesis, the zooxanthellae produce oxygen, which the coral uses for respiration, and more importantly, they produce organic compounds, sugars, lipids, amino acids, through photosynthesis. The zooxanthellae transfer an astounding proportion of these photosynthetic products to their coral hosts, up to 90% of what they produce. This generous sharing allows corals to thrive in the nutrient poor waters of tropical seas, waters so clear and blue precisely because they lack the nutrients that would cloud them with plankton. Without this partnership, corals could not build reefs at the remarkable rates they achieve. The recycling of nutrients between polyp and zooxanthellae is so tight so efficient that it becomes the driving force behind the entire reef ecosystem. When this relationship breaks down, as it does during coral bleaching events, the consequences are devastating for both partners. The zooxanthellae lose their protected home, and the coral loses its primary food source. Fact 8. During the day, while you're going about your daily activities, coral polyps are quite still, their tentacles retracted. But as darkness falls over the reef, a transformation occurs. The polyps extend their tentacles, creating a fuzzy appearance on the reef surface, and begin to feed. They capture tiny plankton and other microscopic organisms from the water column, supplementing the food they receive from their zooxanthellae partners. Fact 9. Coral skeletons are composed of calcium carbonate, also known as limestone, the same mineral found in chalk, marble, and the shells of mollusks. Corals extract this mineral from seawater through a remarkable process that scientists are still working to fully understand. The polyps secrete this mineral from their basal plate, the bottom surface of their soft body tissue, building cup-like structures called corallites that protect them from predators and environmental stresses. As each generation of polyps grows upward and outward over the course of months and years, they leave behind their calcium carbonate skeletons as a permanent foundation. New polyps grow on top of these foundations, adding layer upon layer of limestone, like ancient civilizations building new cities atop the ruins of old ones. This continuous process, repeated millions of times across thousands of years, creates the massive reef structures we see today. The skeleton isn't uniform throughout. It has a complex internal architecture with walls, septa, which are radiating partitions inside the corallite, and various other structural elements that help scientists identify different coral species, even from fossilized remains. The texture can vary from smooth and dense in massive corals to intricate and porous in branching species. These skeletal structures are not just passive support, they channel water flow in ways that bring nutrients to the polyps and remove waste. The architecture creates countless nooks, crannies, caves, and overhangs that provide shelter for thousands of other reef organisms, from tiny invertebrates to large fish. Fact 10. The process of building these limestone skeletons is called calcification, and it's far more complex than scientists initially understood. For many years, researchers assumed that corals simply precipitated calcium carbonate directly from seawater through a relatively straightforward chemical process. However, recent groundbreaking research using advanced spectromicroscopy techniques has revealed a much more sophisticated mechanism. Scientists have discovered that corals don't grow their skeletons through simple crystallization. Instead, they form tiny particles of amorphous calcium carbonate within their tissues, about 400 nanometers in size, roughly 400 times smaller than the width of a human hair. These particles are created inside specialized cells or vesicles within the coral's tissue layer. The coral then transports these particles to the growing edge of its skeleton, where they attach to the existing structure. Once attached, these amorphous particles remain unstable for several hours before gradually transforming into aragonite, a specific crystalline form of calcium carbonate that's harder and more stable than the original amorphous material. This particle-based growth mechanism is more than 100 times faster than ion by ion crystal growth from solution would be, giving corals a distinct advantage in the crowded, competitive reef environment where speed of growth can mean the difference between claiming valuable space and being overgrown by neighbors. This discovery has important implications for understanding how corals might respond to ocean acidification, because if the particles are formed inside tissue rather than directly from seawater, corals may have more control over the process than previously thought. Or the diversity of reef life. Fact 11. Although coral reefs occupy less than 1% of the ocean floor, covering an area roughly equivalent to half the size of France, when all the world's reefs are combined, they are home to approximately 25% of all known marine species. Think about that remarkable statistic for a moment. In less than 1/100th of the ocean's vast expanse, a quarter of all marine life makes its home. This makes coral reefs one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on our entire planet, rivaling even tropical rainforests in their species richness and far exceeding them in the density of species per unit area. The three-dimensional structure of coral reefs creates an almost infinite variety of microhabitats: deep caves where darkness reigns, shallow platforms bathed in intense sunlight, vertical walls swept by strong currents, sheltered crevices protected from waves, rubble zones colonized by pioneering species, sandy patches between coral heads. Each of these microhabitats supports its own specialized community of organisms. There are fish that live only in the branching arms of staghorn corals, shrimp that form lifelong partnerships with specific sea anemones, tiny crabs that make their homes exclusively within the branches of certain coral species. This stratification and specialization of habitats allows thousands of species to coexist in close proximity, each occupying its own ecological niche, each playing its role in the complex web of reef life. Fact 12. Coral reef ecosystems support an estimated 6,000 to 8,000 species of fish alone, from tiny gobies that live for less than 60 days, making them the world's shortest-lived vertebrates, to massive groupers and sharks. The variety of fish life on reefs is staggering. Many of these species are found nowhere else on Earth. Fact 13. The Indo-Pacific region, which includes the Pacific and Indian Oceans, as well as the Red Sea, contains the richest coral reef fish diversity on Earth, with an estimated 4,000 to 5,000 species. The tropical Western Atlantic, including the Caribbean, hosts another 500 to 700 species. Each region has evolved its own unique assemblage of reef dwellers, with virtually no natural overlap between them. Fact 14. The Coral Triangle, a region encompassing Indonesia, the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, and parts of several other nations, is the global epicenter of marine biodiversity. This area contains 37% of the world's coral reef fish species and hosts 76% of the world's coral species. Within this triangle, the Bird's Head Peninsula of Indonesian Papua holds the world record for coral diversity, with 574 species, which represents 72% of all coral species found worldwide. Fact 15. Reef fish have evolved remarkable adaptations for life among the corals, and their bodies come in every conceivable shape, each form a beautiful solution to specific ecological challenges. Butterfly fish possess laterally compressed bodies, flattened from side to side like playing cards standing on edge, which allows them to slip through narrow crevices between coral branches to reach hidden prey or escape from predators. Needlefish and trumpetfish are elongated like living arrows, their streamlined bodies built for rapid, precise strikes at prey, able to dart forward with explosive speed from a stationary position. Groupers boast robust, powerful bodies with enormous mouths, perfect for their ambush hunting strategy. They wait motionless in caves or under ledges, then surge forward to engulf passing fish in a single gulp. Surgeonfish display streamlined, disc-shaped bodies that reduce drag for efficient swimming in the open water above reefs, where they school by the hundreds to feed on drifting plankton or swim from feeding grounds to sleeping sites. Moray eels have reduced their fins almost to nothing, evolving snake-like flexibility to navigate the maze-like interior structure of the reef, reaching prey in holes and crevices that other predators cannot access. Gobies and blennies are tiny and specialized for life on the reef surface, their small size allowing them to hide in holes drilled by worms or abandoned by other creatures. Parrotfish evolved their distinctive beak-like mouths for scraping algae from hard surfaces. Each body plan perfectly matches not only the fish's ecological role, but also its preferred microhabitat within the reef's three-dimensional complexity. Some species spend their lives in the surge zone, where waves break, others in the calm lagoon, still others in deep caves or on the reef slope. This diversity of form reflects hundreds of millions of years of evolution, each lineage finding its particular niche and perfecting the physical traits needed to thrive there. Fact 16. The vivid colors and bold patterns of reef fish serve multiple purposes beyond simple beauty. They help fish identify members of their own species, signal their readiness to mate, warn predators of toxicity, or even confuse enemies through disruptive coloration that breaks up the fish's outline against the complex reef background. Fact 17. Some coral reef fish engage in fascinating cleaning relationships. Cleaner wrasses, for instance, establish cleaning stations where larger fish come to have parasites removed. The larger fish, even predators, remain perfectly still and open their mouths and gills to allow the tiny cleaners to do their work. This mutualistic relationship benefits both parties. The cleaners get food, and their clients get relief from parasites. The Great Barrier Reef. Fact 18. The Great Barrier Reef, located off the northeastern coast of Queensland, Australia, in the warm waters of the Coral Sea, is the world's largest coral reef system, and its dimensions are truly staggering when you begin to comprehend them. It's composed of over 2,900 individual reefs, each one a distinct ecosystem, and 900 islands, both sandy coral cays and larger continental islands with lush vegetation. This vast complex stretches for more than 2,300 kilometers along the Australian coastline, roughly the distance from Seattle to San Diego on the US West Coast, or from London to Athens in Europe. It covers an area of approximately 344,400 square kilometers, which is difficult to visualize until you compare it to familiar land masses. To put this in perspective, that's roughly the size of Japan, Germany, or Italy. It's larger than the United Kingdom, Switzerland, and Holland combined. It's bigger than the US states of Victoria and Tasmania together. If you were to lay the Great Barrier Reef along the coast of France, it would cover 67% of France's entire coastline. The reef is so immense that different sections can experience different weather patterns simultaneously. The northern sections might be experiencing calm, clear conditions while the southern sections are being battered by storms. At its widest point, the reef system extends approximately 250 kilometers from the coast, while at its narrowest, it approaches within about 60 kilometers of the mainland. Fact 19. The Great Barrier Reef is the largest structure ever made by living organisms. It's so vast that it can be clearly seen from outer space, appearing as a complex string of reefall structures along Australia's northeast coast. Astronauts orbiting Earth can distinguish its intricate patterns without the aid of magnification. Fact 20. Despite its fame and grandeur, coral reefs actually comprise only about 7% of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. The remaining 93% consists of an extraordinary variety of other marine habitats, including seagrass beds, mangrove forests, sandy plains, algal and sponge gardens, and deep oceanic waters extending more than 250 kilometers offshore. Fact 21. The Great Barrier Reef supports more than 7,000 species of fish, invertebrates, plants, sea turtles, birds, and marine mammals. Among these are 6 of the world's 7 species of marine turtles, numerous species of whales and dolphins, and the dugong, also known as the sea cow, which is threatened with extinction. Fact 22. Approximately 2 million people visit the Great Barrier Reef each year, generating about 6 billion Australian dollars in tourism revenue and supporting more than 60,000 full-time jobs. This makes the reef not only an ecological treasure, but also a vital economic resource for the region. Trekkurter, types of coral reefs. Fact 23. Scientists generally recognize 4 main types of coral reefs: fringing reefs, barrier reefs, atolls, and patch reefs. Each type forms under different conditions and has distinct characteristics that make it unique. Fact 24. Fringing reefs are the most common type of coral reef found throughout the tropical oceans. Accounting for the majority of reef structures worldwide, they grow directly from the shoreline or very close to land, separated from the beach by only a narrow, shallow lagoon, sometimes just a few dozen meters wide, or in some cases with no lagoon at all. The living coral beginning right at the water's edge. The formation process begins when free-swimming coral larvae, drifting on ocean currents during their planktonic stage, encounter suitable, hard substrate, rock outcrops, ancient limestone platforms, or even the remains of older, dead reefs, along the edges of islands or continents. When conditions are right, meaning the water is warm enough, clear enough, and shallow enough for sunlight to penetrate, these microscopic larvae settle and metamorphose into founding polyps. These pioneers begin the slow work of building a new reef, growing and budding, creating colonies that expand both upward toward the light and outward toward the open ocean. Over centuries and millennia, the reef grows seaward, sometimes extending hundreds of meters from the original shoreline. Fringing reefs typically have 2 main zones: the reef flat, which is the shoreward section that may be exposed or nearly exposed at low tide, and the reef slope or forereef, which faces the open ocean and drops away into deeper water. The reef flat, being closest to land, often experiences more environmental stress from terrestrial runoff, temperature fluctuations, and sediment, while the reef slope, constantly refreshed by oceanic currents, typically harbors more diverse coral communities and larger numbers of fish. Fact 25. The largest fringing reef in the world is the Ningaloo Reef, stretching approximately 260 kilometers along the coastline of Western Australia. Despite being less famous than the Great Barrier Reef, Ningaloo offers some of the most pristine coral reef diving experiences on Earth. Fact 26. Barrier reefs are similar to fringing reefs, but are separated from the coastline by a much deeper and wider lagoon. They form either through the subsidence of land masses or through sea level rise. As the land slowly sinks or the sea rises, the reef continues to grow upward, eventually creating a barrier between the open ocean and the coast. The Great Barrier Reef is, of course, the most famous example of this reef type. Fact 27. Atolls are ring-shaped reefs that encircle a central lagoon with no landmass remaining in the middle, and they represent one of the most remarkable geological phenomena on Earth. These structures begin their lives hundreds of thousands or even millions of years ago as fringing reefs surrounding volcanic islands. Picture a volcanic island in its prime, a cone of basalt rising from the ocean floor, perhaps with verdant slopes and streams flowing down to the sea, surrounded by a living necklace of coral growing in the warm, shallow waters at its base. But volcanic islands have a limited lifespan. The volcanic activity that created them eventually ceases, and once the volcano goes dormant, the island begins a long, slow descent. This subsidence occurs because the oceanic crust upon which the island sits gradually cools and contracts as it moves away from the spreading ridge where it was formed, or because the island's own weight causes the crust beneath it to sag. As the island sinks at a rate of perhaps a few millimeters per year, something remarkable happens. The coral reef continues to grow upward, matching the rate of subsidence, always maintaining its position just below the ocean surface, where light can fuel the photosynthesis of its zooxanthellae. The fringing reef that once hugged the island's shores gradually becomes separated from the sinking land by an ever-widening and deepening lagoon, transitioning through a barrier reef stage. Eventually, after millions of years, the central island disappears completely beneath the waves, and all that remains is a ring of living coral encircling a lagoon that can be 50 meters deep or more, the ghost of a mountain that once rose high above the waves. Fact 28. The formation of atolls can take as long as 30 million years. This theory, first proposed by Charles Darwin in the 1800s, has been confirmed by modern science. Darwin was correct in his observations, though he had no explanation at the time for how volcanic islands could sink. Today, we understand that this occurs as oceanic crust moves away from spreading centers and cools, or as sea levels rise from glacial melting. Fact 29. The Maldives in the Indian Ocean and many islands in the Pacific, including those in French Polynesia and the Marshall Islands, are classic examples of atoll formations. These circular reefs create some of the most stunning island nations on Earth, with crystal clear lagoons protected by the surrounding reef. Fact 30. Patch reefs are small, isolated coral formations that grow up from the open bottom of island platforms or continental shelves. They usually occur between fringing reefs and barrier reefs and vary greatly in size and shape. Think of them as coral gardens scattered across the seafloor, each a miniature ecosystem unto itself. or the life cycle of coral. Fact 31. Most coral species reproduce sexually once a year in a phenomenon called mass coral spawning, and it is one of the most spectacular natural occurrences in the ocean, a truly breathtaking event that transforms the underwater landscape into something out of a dream within just a few nights each year, sometimes within a window of just 1 or 2 hours on a single night. Entire colonies of coral simultaneously release millions upon millions of eggs and sperm into the water, creating what divers and scientists describe as an underwater blizzard or snowstorm of reproductive material. Imagine being underwater during this event. Suddenly, the water around you fills with the tiny packages of eggs and sperm, pink, orange, red, and white bundles rising from every coral colony as far as you can see, floating upward through the beam of your dive light like snowflakes in reverse, ascending toward the moonlit surface. The sheer scale is almost incomprehensible. A single reef can release trillions of gamete bundles in one night, enough to cloud the water and reduce visibility to just a few feet. This synchronized release is crucial for coral reproduction because it overwhelms predators with sheer numbers and ensures that eggs and sperm from different colonies have the best possible chance of meeting and fertilizing. If corals release their gametes randomly throughout the year, the chances of successful fertilization would be infinitesimally small in the vast ocean. But by coordinating this release down to the hour, corals create a moment of such concentrated reproductive potential that even the massive losses to predation cannot prevent successful fertilization and the creation of the next generation. Fact 32. The timing of mass spawning is exquisitely calibrated to environmental cues, a coordination so precise that scientists can often predict spawning events months in advance with remarkable accuracy. The long term timing, determining which month or season spawning will occur, may be related to water temperature patterns, day length changes throughout the year, and particularly the rate at which temperature changes, whether it's increasing toward summer or decreasing toward winter. Different reef locations spawn at different times based on their local conditions. Inshore reefs on the Great Barrier Reef typically spawn in October, while outer reefs spawn in November or December. Caribbean reefs often spawn in August or September, a few days after the full moon. The short-term readiness, the priming that tells corals to prepare their gametes for imminent release, typically depends on lunar cycles. The full moon provides a reliable signal, visible even to organisms without eyes. The increased light at night penetrates into the reef, triggering hormonal changes in the coral polyps. Most mass spawning events occur in the days immediately following a full moon, though some species spawn on the new moon instead. The final trigger for the actual release, determining not just which night, but which hour the gametes will be released, is often related to the time of sunset. Scientists observing coral spawning often see the release begin like a clockwork, starting within minutes of the same time each night, typically in the hours after sunset when darkness has fallen, but some residual twilight might still glow in the western sky. This multi-layered timing system ensures that all colonies of a given species across an entire reef release their gametes within the same narrow window, maximizing the chances of cross-fertilization between genetically distinct colonies. Fact 33. Corals release their gametes in bundles that float slowly to the ocean surface. These packages, filled with fatty substances called lipids, rise through the water column like tiny balloons. For the brief period, they're viable, usually just a few hours. These gametes represent the reef's future, carrying genetic diversity across vast distances. Fact 34. The fertilized eggs develop into free-swimming larvae called planulae. These tiny creatures, barely visible to the naked eye, drift with ocean currents for days or even weeks. During this time, they're incredibly vulnerable to predation, with only a small fraction surviving their perilous journey through the plankton-rich waters. Fact 35. When a planula larva finds a suitable hard surface, it settles and metamorphoses into a single coral polyp. This founding polyp then begins to divide through asexual reproduction, a process called budding, where it creates clones of itself. Over time, as budding continues, a single polyp becomes hundreds, then thousands, then millions, forming a coral colony. Fact 36. Not all corals are broadcast spawners. Some species, called brooders, fertilize their eggs internally. The female polyps retain the developing larvae inside their bodies until they're ready to settle. These larvae spend much less time in the water column and tend to settle much closer to their parent colonies than broadcast spawning species. Fact 37. Corals only reproduce when they're healthy and have sufficient energy reserves. If a reef is stressed by poor water quality, excessive heat, pollution, or other disturbances, the corals will redirect their energy toward survival rather than reproduction. This means that protecting coral health is essential not just for existing reefs, but for ensuring future generations of coral. Dregru, the hidden workers of the reef. Fact 38. Parrotfish, those colorful characters with beak-like mouths formed from fused teeth that truly do resemble a parrot's beak, are among the most important fish on coral reefs, though their crucial role is often underappreciated by casual observers. They spend an astounding portion of their lives, up to 90% of their waking hours, grazing on algae that grows on dead coral and rock surfaces. This constant grazing serves multiple essential functions for reef health. First, and most obviously, by constantly removing this algae, they prevent it from smothering living coral polyps and stealing the sunlight corals need to support their zooxanthellae. Algae grows quickly in the nutrient-rich tropical sunlight, and without herbivores like parrotfish to keep it in check, it would overgrow corals within months or even weeks. Second, their grazing creates space for baby corals to settle and grow. Coral larvae need bare rock or dead coral skeleton to settle on. They cannot attach to surfaces covered in thick algal mats. By scraping the reef clean, parrotfish essentially prepare settlement sites for the next generation of corals. The sound of parrotfish feeding is one of the characteristic sounds of a healthy reef, a constant crunching, scraping noise as their beaks rasp against the limestone, a sound so distinctive that experienced divers can identify a healthy reef partly by its soundscape. Some researchers have found that the abundance of parrotfish on a reef is one of the best predictors of that reef's ability to recover from disturbances like bleaching events or storm damage. Fact 39. Parrotfish are also prolific sand producers, unexpected sculptors of the tropical beaches we love to walk on barefoot. As they scrape algae off the reef surface with their powerful beaks, they inadvertently ingest chunks of coral skeleton and rock along with their food. There's simply no way to scrape the thin algal layer without taking some substrate with it. These materials pass through the parrotfish's digestive system, where powerful pharyngeal teeth, a second set of jaws located in the throat, grind the ingested limestone into progressively finer particles. Think of it as an internal mill, crushing and pulverizing the calcium carbonate into powder. The digestive process extracts any organic matter and nutrients, and then the ground up limestone is expelled as fine sand. Clouds of white particles drifting down from the fish to settle on the reef and surrounding seafloor. The quantities are remarkable. A single large parrotfish, say a meter-long rainbow or bumphead parrotfish, can produce several hundred pounds of fine white coral sand each year through this process. On a healthy reef with good parrotfish populations, the collective contribution of all the parrotfish can amount to tons of sand produced annually. Much of the beautiful white sand on tropical beaches, the sand tourists photograph their toes in, the sand children build castles with, the sand that crunches softly underfoot, originated inside the digestive system of a parrotfish. Next time you're standing on a Caribbean or Pacific beach, take a moment to appreciate that the ground beneath your feet may be largely composed of parrotfish poop, though biogenic sand sounds rather more elegant. This sand production isn't just an interesting side effect, it's an important ecological process that contributes to beach formation, fills in spaces between coral heads, and creates habitat for sand-dwelling organisms. Fact 40. The relationship between parrotfish and coral health has been confirmed by studying fossilized parrotfish teeth. Researchers found that when parrotfish populations were abundant on reefs throughout history, coral growth rates were significantly higher. This demonstrates that protecting parrotfish from overfishing is crucial for maintaining healthy, coral-dominated reef ecosystems. Fact 41. Beyond their ecological importance, parrotfish exhibit fascinating social behaviors. Male spotlight parrotfish, one of the larger Caribbean species, defend territories as large as 2 tennis courts. They patrol these areas constantly, chasing away rival males and attracting small groups of female followers. Meanwhile, non-territorial floater males scout the reefs, ready to claim any territory that becomes available. Fact 42. Sea sponges, often overlooked among the reef's more colorful inhabitants, play vital roles in reef health. These primitive animals filter enormous volumes of water, removing bacteria and organic particles that would otherwise cloud the water. Their intricate internal structures also provide shelter for countless small creatures, including shrimp, crabs, brittle stars, and juvenile fish. Fact 43. Sponges are remarkable recyclers. They consume nutrients filtered from the water and produce waste products that feed many other reef species. In turn, sponges become food for certain fish, sea turtles, and nudibranchs. Some sponges even produce chemical compounds that are being investigated for potential use in human medicines. Number, growth and formation. Fact 44. Coral growth rates vary dramatically among species. Massive boulder-like corals tend to grow slowly, increasing in size by just 0.5 to 2 centimeters per year. These patient architects may live for centuries, with some colonies documented to be over 400 years old. Fact 45. Branching corals grow much more rapidly than their massive cousins, extending their branches by as much as 10 centimeters per year under favorable conditions. This faster growth allows them to quickly colonize available space and compete successfully with other organisms for prime reef real estate. Fact 46. For a coral reef to form from scratch, it can take 10,000 years or more. Barrier reefs and atolls, with their massive structures, may require anywhere from 100,000 to 30 million years to reach full development. These timescales are difficult for our human minds to fully comprehend, reminding us of the deep patience woven into the fabric of the natural world. Fact 47. Corals grow best in warm, shallow, clear, sunny, and moderately agitated water. The ideal temperature range for most reef building corals is between 23 and 29 degrees Celsius, 73 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit. Water movement is important because it brings nutrients and oxygen to the polyps while removing waste products. Fact 48. Light is essential for reef building corals because their zooxanthellae partners need sunlight for photosynthesis. This is why most coral reefs are found in waters less than 50 meters deep, where sunlight can still penetrate with sufficient intensity to support photosynthesis. Fact 49. Corals need clear water not just for light penetration, but also because excessive sediment can smother them. When sediment settles on coral polyps, they must expend precious energy using their tiny tentacles to brush it away. If sedimentation is too heavy or persistent, the corals can become overwhelmed and die. Fact 50. The chemistry of seawater plays a crucial role in coral calcification. Corals need adequate concentrations of both calcium and carbonate ions to build their skeletons. When these ions are abundant in the water, a condition called high calcium carbonate saturation, corals can grow more readily. When saturation is low, calcification becomes more difficult and energy intensive for the corals. Gitchambutter, the coral reef ecosystem. Fact 51. Coral reefs are often called oases in a desert because they support such abundant life in waters that are actually quite nutrient poor. This creates an intriguing paradox that puzzled scientists for years. How can such high productivity flourish in such nutrient deficient conditions? Fact 52. The answer lies in the incredible efficiency of nutrient recycling within the reef ecosystem. The tight partnership between corals and zooxanthellae, combined with the complex web of interactions among thousands of species, allows nutrients to be reused multiple times before leaving the system. This recycling is so effective that reefs can produce 5 to 10 grams of carbon per square meter per day in biomass. Fact 53. Coral reefs provide 4 distinct zones, each with its own characteristic communities. The fore reef, facing the open ocean, receives the brunt of wave action and typically harbors the most diverse coral growth. The reef crest, at the shallowest point, experiences the most intense sunlight and wave energy. Behind this, the back reef, or reef flat, extends toward shore, often becoming exposed at low tide. Finally, many reefs have a lagoon, a calm, protected body of water between the reef and the coastline. Fact 54. Each zone within a coral reef ecosystem hosts different species adapted to its unique conditions. Fish that thrive in the surge zone of the fore reef, for instance, have powerful bodies built to withstand constant wave action, while lagoon dwellers are often more delicate, adapted to calmer waters. Fact 55. Sea anemones on coral reefs have formed beautiful partnerships with certain fish and crustaceans. The famous relationship between clownfish and their host anemones is perhaps the best known. The anemone provides shelter and protection with its stinging tentacles, while the clownfish, immune to the stings, defends the anemone from predators and provides it with nutrients through its waste. Fact 56. Coral reefs are connected to other coastal ecosystems in important ways. Mangrove forests and seagrass beds often grow near reefs, and many reef species spend different life stages in these different habitats. Juvenile fish, for instance, may grow up in the protective mangrove roots before migrating to the reef as adults. There are threats to coral reefs. Fact 57. Climate change has emerged as the single greatest threat to coral reefs worldwide, a challenge of such magnitude that it overshadows all other threats combined. Rising ocean temperatures, driven by increasing atmospheric carbon dioxide from human activities, cause corals to expel their zooxanthellae partners in a stress response called coral bleaching. The mechanism works like this. When water temperatures exceed the normal seasonal maximum by even 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, the zooxanthellae inside the coral tissues become stressed and begin producing harmful, reactive oxygen species during photosynthesis. These toxic compounds damage both the algae and their coral hosts. Sensing this danger, the coral polyps expel the zooxanthellae, sometimes within just days or even hours of thermal stress beginning. When corals bleach, they turn stark white, revealing their calcium carbonate skeletons beneath their now transparent tissues. The white appearance isn't the color of death, it's the color of the limestone skeleton showing through tissue that's lost its golden brown or green or purple algal partners. Standing on a reef during or after a major bleaching event is a haunting experience. What should be a vibrant garden of color appears ghostly and lifeless, as if someone has drained all the pigment from an underwater painting. The transformation from colorful vitality to monochrome emptiness can happen with shocking speed, sometimes over the course of just a week or two when thermal stress is severe. Fact 58. Bleached corals aren't immediately dead, but they're under severe stress. Without their zooxanthellae, they lose their primary food source and become more vulnerable to starvation and disease. If temperatures return to normal quickly enough, corals can regain their zooxanthellae and recover. However, if stressful conditions persist for too long, the corals die. Fact 59. Mass coral bleaching events have become increasingly frequent and severe, occurring with such regularity now that many reefs no longer have sufficient time to recover between events. The pattern is deeply troubling. The first global scale bleaching event occurred in 1998, triggered by an El Nino event that warmed waters across the tropical oceans. The second came in 2010. Then the frequency accelerated dramatically. Between 2014 and 2017, the world experienced its third global coral bleaching event, the longest and most widespread on record at that time, during which approximately 70% of the world's coral reefs experienced bleaching level heat stress. The northern Great Barrier Reef was hit particularly hard in 2016, with some sections losing up to 90% of their corals in the months following bleaching. Back-to-back bleaching in 2016 and 2017 on many reefs meant that corals had no recovery period. They bleached, and before they could fully recover or produce new recruits, they bleached again. This was followed by a fourth global bleaching event beginning in 2023 and continuing into 2025, which has proven even more extensive, affecting 84.4% of the world's coral reef area as of mid 2025, making it the most geographically comprehensive bleaching event ever recorded. Mass bleaching has now been documented in at least 83 countries and territories. The speed at which these events are occurring is unprecedented in the long history of coral reefs. What once were rare catastrophes separated by decades or centuries are now becoming almost routine occurrences separated by just a few years. This increased frequency leaves insufficient time for reefs to rebuild their coral cover, reproduce successfully, and restore their ecological complexity before the next heat stress event arrives. Fact 60. A water temperature increase of just 1 degree Celsius above normal, sustained for only 4 weeks, can trigger widespread coral bleaching. As global temperatures continue to rise due to greenhouse gas emissions, these temperature thresholds are being exceeded more frequently, leaving reefs with less and less time to recover between bleaching events. Fact 61. Ocean acidification, sometimes called the other CO2 problem, poses another serious and insidious threat to coral reefs that operates alongside but separately from ocean warming. This process begins in the atmosphere, where carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuels accumulates at ever higher concentrations. The ocean acts as an enormous carbon sink, absorbing roughly 30% of the carbon dioxide humans release into the atmosphere. While this absorption helps slow atmospheric warming, it comes at a cost to ocean chemistry. When carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater, it undergoes a series of chemical reactions, combining with water molecules to form carbonic acid. This acid then dissociates, releasing hydrogen ions that lower the pH of seawater. The ocean's pH has already dropped by about 0.1 units since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, which might sound minor until you remember that pH is measured on a logarithmic scale. This represents approximately a 30% increase in acidity. This increasing acidity reduces the availability of carbonate ions that corals and other calcifying organisms need to build their calcium carbonate skeletons and shells. As hydrogen ions become more abundant in seawater, they bond with carbonate ions to form bicarbonate, effectively removing carbonate from circulation. For corals, this means the seawater becomes less supersaturated with calcium carbonate, making the process of calcification more difficult and energy intensive. It's like trying to build a sandcastle with wet sand that won't stick together properly. The raw materials are there, but the conditions make construction frustratingly difficult. Fact 62. While ocean acidification does affect coral skeleton formation, recent research suggests corals may be somewhat more resilient to this threat than initially feared. Corals actively control their calcification process using specialized proteins, which may give them some ability to adapt to changing ocean chemistry. However, this doesn't negate the serious concerns about acidification's long-term impacts. Fact 63. Pollution from land-based sources seriously degrades coral reef health. Runoff, containing sediments, nutrients from fertilizers, pesticides, and sewage, can smother corals, promote harmful algal blooms that block sunlight, and introduce toxins into reef waters. Much of this pollution travels from far inland, carried by rivers and streams, to coastal waters. Fact 64. Overfishing disrupts the delicate balance of reef ecosystems. When herbivorous fish like parrotfish are removed, algae can overgrow the reef, preventing new corals from settling. When predatory fish are depleted, populations of their prey can explode, potentially leading to overconsumption of corals or other important reef organisms. Fact 65. Destructive fishing practices, including blast fishing with dynamite and cyanide poisoning used to capture live fish for the aquarium trade, cause immediate and devastating damage to reef structures. These methods not only destroy coral, but also kill vast numbers of other reef organisms, leaving behind fields of rubble where vibrant reefs once stood. Fact 66. Physical damage from ship groundings, improperly placed anchors, and careless divers or snorkelers can harm centuries old coral colonies in mere moments. While individual instances may seem minor, the cumulative impact across heavily visited reefs can be substantial. Fact 67. Crown of thorns starfish, while a natural part of reef ecosystems, can cause significant coral mortality during population outbreaks. These large starfish feed on coral polyps, and when their numbers explode, often due to nutrient pollution that supports more of their larval food, they can devastate large areas of reef. Fact 68. Coral diseases caused by various bacteria, viruses, and other pathogens have been increasing in frequency and severity. Stony coral tissue loss disease, first detected in Florida in 2014, has spread throughout the Caribbean, affecting over 20 species of coral and causing mortality rates exceeding 90% in some species. Thurber, Conservation, and Hope. Fact 69. Despite these daunting challenges, coral reefs have shown remarkable resilience throughout Earth's history. They've survived 5 mass extinction events and dramatic climate changes over hundreds of millions of years. This deep resilience gives scientists hope that, with proper protection and management, at least some reefs can adapt to current changes. Fact 70. Marine protected areas, regions where fishing and other extractive or destructive activities are restricted or completely prohibited, have proven remarkably effective at increasing coral reef health and resilience when they are properly designed and enforced. The benefits of protection manifest in multiple ways that cascade through the entire reef ecosystem. Reefs within well-managed protected areas typically have dramatically higher fish biomass, sometimes 2 to 5 times more fish by weight than comparable unprotected reefs, and greater diversity of fish species, including a return of large predators like sharks and groupers that are often the first to disappear from fished reefs. With more herbivorous fish present, algae is kept in check, preventing it from overgrowing corals. With predators restored, the entire food web functions more naturally, maintaining appropriate population sizes across all trophic levels. These protected reefs also show greater coral cover, meaning a higher percentage of the reef surface is covered by living coral rather than dead skeleton or algae. Perhaps most importantly, protected reefs demonstrate better recovery rates following disturbances like bleaching events, storms, or crown of thorns starfish outbreaks. When a protected reef bleaches, it typically recovers faster and more completely than a nearby unprotected reef that experienced similar bleaching, because the intact fish populations continue to graze algae, and the healthy coral populations produce more larvae. The key to success lies not just in creating protected areas on paper, but in ensuring they are large enough to encompass representative samples of reef habitats, are well enforced to prevent illegal fishing, are connected to other protected areas to allow larval exchange, and have community support from local people who depend on the reef. Fact 71. Coral restoration projects around the world are pioneering new techniques to help reefs recover, representing one of the most hands-on and hopeful approaches to reef conservation. The basic concept mirrors forestry. Scientists grow coral fragments in underwater nurseries, essentially coral farms, then transplant these grown corals back onto degraded reefs, much like replanting a forest after a fire. The nursery techniques vary, but often involve suspending coral fragments from ropes or structures in the water column, where they receive good water flow and light while being raised above the seafloor, where they might be smothered by sediment or eaten by predators. The corals grow faster in these nurseries than they would on the reef because they're in optimal conditions and aren't competing for space. Some operations use table structures. Others employ tree-like frames where coral fragments hang like ornaments. After 6 months to 2 years of growth, once the fragments have reached an adequate size, restoration workers, often trained volunteers or community members, carefully transport them to degraded reef areas and attach them to the substrate using marine epoxy or other attachment methods. The transplanted corals continue growing in their new locations, and if enough are planted, they can eventually create new breeding populations capable of producing larvae to repopulate surrounding areas naturally. Some projects have successfully restored thousands or even tens of thousands of corals to damaged reef areas, transforming barren limestone rubble back into living reef. The Coral Restoration Foundation in Florida, for instance, has outplanted over 200,000 corals to Florida's reef tract. These projects aren't just about numbers. They're about maintaining genetic diversity, restoring reef function, supporting fish and invertebrate populations, and giving local communities tangible ways to participate in reef conservation while providing important data about what restoration techniques work best. Fact 72. Researchers are exploring coral-assisted evolution, selectively breeding corals that show higher tolerance to heat stress and other environmental challenges. By identifying and propagating these resilient corals, scientists hope to help reefs adapt more quickly to changing ocean conditions. Fact 73. Cryopreservation of coral sperm and larvae is creating a genetic bank for future restoration efforts. During spawning events, scientists collect gametes and preserve them using ultra-cold storage techniques. This genetic library could become crucial for restoring reefs or even repopulating areas where certain coral species have been lost. Fact 74. Some coral populations have shown surprising adaptability. In the Red Sea, certain coral species thrive in waters that regularly exceed temperatures considered lethal for most corals. Scientists are studying these heat-tolerant corals to understand the mechanisms behind their resilience, which might inform conservation strategies elsewhere. Fact 75. Education and community engagement are proving essential for reef conservation. When local communities understand the value of their reefs, both ecologically and economically, they become powerful advocates for protection. Many successful conservation programs are now led by local communities who have the most direct stake in reef health. Numbers, economic and cultural importance. Fact 76. The global economic value of coral reefs is staggering in its magnitude, though difficult to calculate precisely because reefs provide so many services that don't typically enter traditional economic accounting. Conservative estimates place their worth at tens of billions of US dollars per year, while some comprehensive analyses that attempt to capture all ecosystem services suggest the value could exceed $7 trillion annually, with some estimates reaching as high as nearly $10 trillion when accounting for coastal protection services, fisheries, productivity, both commercial and subsistence, tourism and recreation, potential pharmaceutical discoveries, climate regulation through carbon sequestration, cultural and spiritual values, and the sheer existence value that people place on knowing these magnificent ecosystems exist. Breaking down these services helps illuminate why the total is so high. Coastal protection services alone, the natural barrier that reefs provide against storm surge, tsunamis, and everyday wave action, has been valued at hundreds of billions of dollars globally. Reefs absorb up to 97% of wave energy, protecting coastal infrastructure, homes, agricultural land, and human lives. Replacing this service with artificial structures like seawalls would cost far more than the value of the reefs themselves. Tourism generates billions annually as millions of people travel to tropical destinations, specifically to snorkel, dive, or simply enjoy reef protected beaches. Fisheries, depending on reefs, provide protein and livelihoods for hundreds of millions of people. The pharmaceutical potential of reef organisms has barely been tapped, yet compounds derived from corals, sponges, and other reef dwellers are already used in treatments for cancer, HIV, and other diseases. When you consider all these values together, it becomes clear that coral reefs are not just beautiful natural wonders, but critical infrastructure supporting human civilization. Fact 77. Over 500 million people depend directly on coral reefs for food, income, and protection from storms and coastal erosion. For many small island nations and coastal communities, reefs are not merely an economic resource, but the foundation of their entire way of life and culture. Fact 78. Coral reefs protect coastlines by absorbing up to 97% of wave energy from storms, tsunamis, and even normal daily wave action, serving as natural breakwaters that have protected human communities for as long as people have lived near tropical shores. This protective service is one of the most economically valuable functions reefs provide, though it often goes unappreciated until it's lost. The three-dimensional structure of the reef, its complex surface full of ridges, valleys, and coral colonies, creates tremendous friction that dissipates wave energy. As waves pass over and through the reef structure, their energy is absorbed and scattered, so that by the time the waves reach the shore, they're mere ripples compared to what they would be without the reef's presence. During major storms like hurricanes and typhoons, this protection becomes even more critical. Studies have shown that reefs reduce wave energy by 80 to 97% even during extreme storms, significantly reducing flooding, erosion, and storm damage to coastal property and infrastructure. The natural barrier reefs provide is valued globally at hundreds of billions of dollars annually. When economists calculate what it would cost to replace this service with artificial structures. And artificial structures cannot truly replace reefs. Seawalls and breakwaters are expensive to build and maintain, often costing millions of dollars per kilometer. They require regular repair, especially after storms. They don't grow or repair themselves like living reefs do, and they can cause unintended environmental problems like beach erosion or disrupted sediment transport. Without coral reefs, many low-lying coastal areas and small islands would be essentially uninhabitable, subject to constant flooding and erosion. The beaches would disappear. The coastal freshwater supplies would be contaminated by saltwater intrusion, and buildings would be under constant assault from waves. As reefs degrade worldwide, coastal communities are already experiencing increased damage from storms and higher rates of erosion, paying the price for lost reef protection in damaged property and disrupted lives. Fact 79. Commercial and recreational fisheries, depending on coral reefs, are valued at more than $100 million in the United States alone. In tropical nations, reef fisheries often provide the primary source of protein for millions of people. About half of all fisheries species in the U.S. depend on healthy coral reefs for at least part of their life cycle. Fact 80. Tourism centered on coral reefs generates billions of dollars annually and supports millions of jobs worldwide. Diving, snorkeling, glass-bottom boat tours, and simply enjoying the beauty of reef-protected beaches draw travelers from around the globe. In Australia, Great Barrier Reef tourism alone employs over 60,000 people. Fact 81. Coral reefs hold immense potential for medical discoveries. Compounds derived from reef organisms are already used in treatments for asthma, cancer, and HIV. Scientists believe the incredible biodiversity of reefs may hold cures for diseases we haven't yet discovered treatments for. Each species lost is a potential medicine, lost forever. Fact 82. For many indigenous peoples, coral reefs hold deep cultural and spiritual significance. In Hawaiian creation mythology, for instance, the coral polyp was the first organism created from which all other life forms emerged. This perspective reflects the fundamental importance of reefs to island cultures that have lived in harmony with them for thousands of years. Through remarkable reef creatures. Fact 83. Seahorses, among the slowest moving fish in the ocean, are often found anchored to coral branches with their prehensile tails. The dwarf seahorse holds the record as the slowest fish, attaining a top speed of about 5 feet per hour. Despite this leisurely pace, these tiny fish are successful predators, using their tubular snouts like pipettes to suck in small crustaceans. Fact 84. Giant clams, the largest mollusks on Earth, can grow to over a meter long and weigh more than 200 kilograms. Like corals, they host zooxanthellae in their mantles, which give them their brilliant colors and provide them with nutrition through photosynthesis. These ancient mollusks can live for over a century. Fact 85. Moray eels, with their serpentine bodies and fearsome appearance, are actually quite shy and will only bite humans if provoked. These nocturnal hunters have a second set of jaws in their throat called pharyngeal jaws, which they project forward to grasp prey and pull it into their gullet. This unique adaptation makes them highly effective predators of reef, fish, and crustaceans. Fact 86. Nudibranchs, sea slugs of extraordinary beauty, are among the most colorful and bizarrely formed creatures on the reef, appearing in virtually every color and pattern imaginable, often in combinations that seem impossible in nature. Their name comes from Latin words meaning naked gills, referring to the external breathing structures many species bear on their backs, like tiny flowering plants or feathery plumes. These shell-less mollusks, relatives of snails and octopuses, range in size from just a few millimeters to over 30 centimeters long, and they display an almost limitless variety of body shapes, textures, and decorations. Some are smooth and streamlined like miniature submarines. Others are covered in tentacle-like serrata that wave in the current. Still others bear elaborate frills, horns, or rhinophore tentacles that sense chemicals in the water. The colors serve various purposes. Some nudibranchs are brightly colored to warn predators that they're toxic. Others use camouflage to blend with their preferred food source. And some flash brilliant colors simply because no predator can catch them anyway. Many species eat sponges, sea anemones, or even other nudibranchs, and remarkably, they can store the stinging cells from their prey in specialized sacs in their own tissues, making themselves toxic to predators. This process, called kleptocnody, allows the slugs to co-opt the defensive mechanisms of their prey. Some species even steal the chloroplasts from the algae they eat, incorporating these photosynthetic organelles into their own tissues and essentially becoming solar-powered slugs. Watching a nudibranch move across a reef is like watching a piece of living art, a creature that seems too fantastical to be real, yet there it is, gliding gracefully over the coral, searching for its next meal. Fact 87. Mantis shrimp. Despite their small size, most species are just a few inches long, though some can reach a foot in length. Pack one of the most powerful punches in the entire animal kingdom, a strike so fast and forceful that it seems to defy physics. Their specialized front limbs, called raptorial appendages, come in two main types. Some species have spear-like limbs for impaling soft-bodied prey, while others, the smashers, have club-like limbs designed for hammering. These clubs can strike with acceleration comparable to a .22 caliber bullet, leaving a gun reaching speeds of around 50 miles per hour in just a few thousandths of a second. The force is sufficient to break through the shells of crabs, snails, and clams, and aquarium owners have documented mantis shrimp shattering the glass walls of their tanks with repeated strikes. The physics of the strike are remarkable. The limb is cocked back and held in place by a latch mechanism, like drawing back a crossbow. When released, stored elastic energy in the limb structure accelerates it forward with enormous power. The strike is so fast that it creates cavitation bubbles in the water. As the club passes through the water, it creates a low-pressure region where the water actually boils for a split second, forming bubbles that then collapse. These collapsing bubbles generate their own shock wave and release a flash of light through a phenomenon called sonoluminescence. So, the prey receives not one, but two impacts. The physical strike of the club followed immediately by the shock wave from the cavitation bubbles. This double punch can stun or kill prey even if the initial strike misses slightly. Beyond their remarkable striking ability, mantis shrimp possess the most complex visual system known to science, with 16 types of photoreceptor cells compared to our measly 3. allowing them to see polarized light, ultraviolet light, and a rainbow of colors we cannot imagine. Fact 88. Octopuses dwelling on coral reefs are masters of camouflage and escape. They can change color and texture almost instantaneously, squeezing their boneless bodies through impossibly small crevices. The mimic octopus can even impersonate other animals, including lionfish, flatfish, and sea snakes, to avoid predators. Fact 89. Reef sharks, including black-tip reef sharks and white-tip reef sharks, are generally not aggressive toward humans. These sharks play crucial roles as apex predators, helping maintain the balance of reef fish populations. Healthy reef ecosystems almost always include healthy shark populations. Fact 90. Cleaner shrimp establish cleaning stations alongside cleaner wrasses, where they remove parasites and dead tissue from fish. These shrimp advertise their services by performing a distinctive swaying dance. Fish line up at these stations, and the shrimp fearlessly enter the mouths and gill cavities of even large predatory fish. The science of reefs. Fact 91. Coral skeletons serve as natural archives of past ocean conditions, living libraries that record the history of the seas in calcium carbonate and trace elements. Scientists can extract cores from massive coral colonies using specially designed drilling equipment, creating tubular samples that penetrate deep into the coral structure, similar to the way ice cores are taken from glaciers or tree cores from ancient forests. These coral cores, sometimes extending several meters in length, reveal annual growth bands, much like tree rings, each band representing a year of the coral's life. The width of these bands varies depending on environmental conditions. Corals grow faster in good years with optimal temperature, light, and nutrients, producing thicker bands, while stressed years produce thinner bands. But the true treasure lies in the chemical composition of the calcium carbonate itself. As corals build their skeletons, they incorporate various elements and isotopes from the surrounding seawater in ratios that depend on environmental conditions. The ratio of oxygen 18 to oxygen 16 isotopes, for instance, varies with water temperature and salinity, allowing scientists to reconstruct past sea surface temperatures and rainfall patterns. Strontium-calcium ratios also reflect temperature. The concentration of uranium can indicate water pH and carbonate chemistry. Trace elements like barium can signal river discharge and nutrient influxes. By analyzing these chemical signatures, band by band, scientists can create detailed records of ocean conditions extending back centuries, revealing how temperature, chemistry, and circulation patterns have changed over time. Some cores from massive Porites corals in the Pacific have provided continuous records stretching back more than 400 years, offering windows into pre-industrial ocean conditions and helping us understand the scale and speed of recent anthropogenic changes. Fact 92. Some individual coral colonies have been alive for over 4,000 years. These ancient creatures have lived through the entire span of recorded human history, silently growing in the same spot while civilizations rose and fell on distant shores. They are living witnesses to millennia of ocean change. Fact 93. Fluorescence in corals has puzzled and fascinated scientists for decades, creating underwater displays that seem too fantastical to be real. Some corals, when illuminated with blue or ultraviolet light, glow with an otherworldly radiance in brilliant blues, greens, oranges, reds, and even pinks, colors so intense and pure that they look like something from a science fiction film rather than Earth's oceans. This phenomenon occurs because certain coral proteins absorb light at one wavelength and re-emit it at a longer wavelength, a process called fluorescence. If you've ever seen photographs of reefs taken under special lighting, with corals glowing electric green and hot pink against a dark background, you've witnessed this fluorescence. For years, scientists wondered why corals would invest energy in producing these fluorescent proteins. Recent research suggests multiple possible functions, and the answer may vary by species and depth. The leading hypothesis is that these proteins act as sunscreens, protecting both the corals and their delicate zooxanthellae from harmful ultraviolet radiation in shallow water. The proteins absorb high energy UV light that could damage cellular structures and DNA, then re emit that energy as lower energy visible light that's harmless or even useful for photosynthesis. In deeper water, fluorescent proteins might serve the opposite function, acting as light enhancers that capture blue light, which penetrates deeper into the ocean, and convert it into red or orange light that the zooxanthellae can use more efficiently for photosynthesis. Some scientists speculate fluorescent colors might also play roles in intercoral competition, signaling, or attracting symbiotic organisms. The genes for these fluorescent proteins have proven incredibly valuable to science beyond coral research. Green fluorescent protein, originally isolated from jellyfish, but similar to coral fluorescent proteins, has revolutionized cell biology by allowing scientists to tag and track specific proteins and cells in living organisms, an advance so significant that it earned its discoverers the 2008 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Fact 94. Coral reefs help regulate the carbon cycle. While the ocean as a whole absorbs vast amounts of atmospheric carbon dioxide, coral reefs play a complex role in this process. The zooxanthellae in corals remove CO2 through photosynthesis, while the calcification process actually releases CO2. The net balance and its implications for climate change remain active areas of research. Fact 95. Sound is surprisingly important on coral reefs, and healthy reefs create a constant symphony that's every bit as distinctive as their visual beauty. If you could shrink yourself down and sit on a healthy reef at night, you'd be surrounded by a cacophony of biological sounds, the constant crackling and popping of snapping shrimp, which dominate the reef soundscape like static on a radio, created when these tiny crustaceans snap their specialized claws shut so quickly that they create cavitation bubbles that collapse with an audible pop. You'd hear the crunching of parrotfish beaks scraping algae from coral, the grinding of sea urchin teeth rasping across rock, the grunts and groans of groupers and grunts communicating with each other, using their swim bladders as resonating chambers. At dusk and dawn, the reef can erupt in a chorus as fish become more vocal. Scientists recording these soundscapes have found that healthy reefs produce a rich, complex audio signature, a dense wall of sound across many frequencies. This reef noise isn't just interesting acoustically, it serves important ecological functions. Coral larvae drifting in the open ocean can hear reef sounds from kilometers away and use them to navigate towards suitable settlement sites. Fish larvae likewise orient themselves using sound cues swimming toward the crackle and pop of healthy reefs. The soundscape acts as a beacon, guiding the next generation home. But degraded reefs are eerily quiet. When corals die, the reef's three-dimensional structure begins to erode, and the fish, invertebrates, and other sound-producing organisms decline or disappear. The soundscape changes from a rich symphony to a whisper. Scientists have learned they can assess reef health remarkably accurately simply by listening, deploying underwater microphones to record the reef's acoustic signature. Some restoration projects are even experimenting with playing recordings of healthy reef sounds near degraded reefs to attract settling larvae, essentially using audio lures to jumpstart the recovery process. Drucker, looking forward. Fact 96. Computer models predict that if current trends continue, many coral reefs could experience annual bleaching by 2050. However, these projections are not inevitabilities. They represent possible futures that can still be avoided through rapid action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and local stressors. Fact 97. International agreements, like the Coral Reef Breakthrough, signed by 45 countries, pledge to protect 125,000 square kilometers of reefs through investments exceeding $12 billion. These collaborative efforts recognize that coral reefs are a global heritage, requiring coordinated international response. Fact 98. Technological innovations, including artificial intelligence and machine learning, are being deployed to monitor reef health at unprecedented scales. Satellites, underwater robots, and vast networks of sensors now provide near real-time information about ocean conditions and coral status across the globe. Fact 99. Despite the daunting challenges they face and the alarming news that dominates headlines, coral reefs continue to demonstrate remarkable resilience, a capacity for recovery that offers genuine hope if we can give them the breathing room they need. After the devastating 2016-2017 bleaching event on the Great Barrier Reef, one of the most severe thermal stress events ever recorded, which caused massive coral mortality, particularly in the northern sections of the reef. Scientists conducting long-term monitoring surveys in 2022 discovered something encouraging. Some sections of the reef had achieved the highest coral cover recorded since systematic monitoring began decades earlier. This doesn't mean the reef has fully recovered. Far from it. The coral communities that returned are often different from what was lost, with fast-growing species sometimes replacing slow-growing ones, and overall biodiversity may be reduced. But the very fact that recovery occurred at all, and at impressive rates in some areas, demonstrates that reefs possess inherent mechanisms for regeneration when conditions allow. This recovery happened through multiple pathways. Some bleached corals survived and regained their zooxanthellae, resuming normal function after the stress passed. Coral larvae, produced by healthy sections of the reef or by recovering colonies, settled in damaged areas, establishing new populations. Fragments, broken from existing colonies during storms, reattached and grew into new colonies. The key insight from these recovery stories is that reefs can bounce back when given the chance, when bleaching events don't occur every year, when fish populations remain healthy to control algae, when water quality is maintained, when physical damage is minimized. This resilience is not infinite, but it exists, and it's a crucial factor in determining which reefs might survive the challenges of the coming decades. Fact 100. The future of coral reefs ultimately depends on decisions we make today, choices that will ripple through time and determine whether these ancient ecosystems survive to celebrate their 500 millionth anniversary or fade into memory within our children's lifetimes. The path forward requires action on multiple fronts, working simultaneously on global and local scales. Globally, we must address climate change by rapidly reducing greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning away from fossil fuels toward renewable energy sources, and implementing carbon capture technologies. The Paris Agreement's goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre industrial levels isn't arbitrary. It represents a threshold beyond which coral reefs face near certain widespread collapse. Locally, communities can reduce stressors that compound climate impacts, improving water quality by managing agricultural runoff, treating sewage before it reaches coastal waters, and controlling sedimentation from coastal development, protecting key species like parrotfish through fishing regulations ensures reef ecosystems maintain their ecological balance and ability to recover from disturbances, establishing and effectively enforcing marine protected areas creates refugia where reefs can thrive, with minimal human interference, serving as sources of larvae to repopulate damaged areas and as living laboratories to study reef resilience, supporting reef restoration efforts from coral gardening projects that grow and transplant thousands of coral fragments to assisted evolution programs that breed heat-tolerant corals, provides additional tools for maintaining reef biodiversity. Investing in scientific research helps us understand reef ecology, predict future changes, and develop innovative conservation strategies. Education ensures that current and future generations understand why reefs matter and are motivated to protect them. Every action, from global climate policy to individual choices about seafood consumption, energy use, and plastic waste, contributes to the collective effort of reef conservation. The challenge is immense, but so is the prize, preserving one of nature's greatest achievements for millions of years to come, ensuring that future generations can experience the wonder of swimming through a living coral reef, surrounded by color and movement and life in all its magnificent complexity. As our journey through the coral reef comes to an end, we surface slowly from these underwater cities, carrying with us a deeper appreciation for the complexity, beauty, and fragility of these remarkable ecosystems. Each fact we've explored tonight represents countless hours of scientific study, countless moments of wonder experienced by divers and researchers, and countless generations of organisms working together in one of nature's most intricate collaborations. The coral polyps will continue their patient work tonight, building their limestone fortresses molecule by molecule. The parrotfish will wake with the dawn to resume their algae grazing duties. The zooxanthellae will capture the first rays of sunlight and begin another day of photosynthesis. And somewhere in the vast ocean, coral larvae drift on currents toward reefs that may not yet exist, carrying within them the genetic instructions for tomorrow's reefs. You've been wonderful company on this gentle exploration. If you found peace in this journey through the reef, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to leave a like on this video and consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps create more of these relaxing educational experiences, and it lets me know that these quiet journeys through the natural world bring you the same sense of wonder and calm they bring me. May your sleep be as deep and peaceful as the ocean, as gentle as a tropical current, and as full of dreams as a coral reef is full of life. Good night, dear friend. Rest well.